Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Welcome in. It is the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket, theticketfm.com. You're most likely listening to this via the podcast version. Make sure if that's where indeed you are listening, you've subscribed to the show. You've found it by searching the Corner 3 with Austin Oerman, wherever it is you get your podcast. That will be the easiest, the simplest way to catch the show, because tonight's show is not live. We got high school football on the air right now. My beloved Lincoln Lutheran Warriors, throw them up. Let's go Warriors. I guess it'd be this way for the rest of you. Yeah, there we go. LL, Lincoln Lutheran, Spirit Sword game against Lincoln Christian going on tonight. So we are excited to see the Warriors keep the sword, keep it in the hallowed halls of Lincoln Lutheran at 56th and Vine. Probably won't be able to keep you updated on that, but if you're hearing this, you probably heard Nick Steinert's call over the air, so that's why you found this either again via the podcast or via the social media stream. With that, with the show not being live, the best way for you to interact with the show is with me on Twitter. You see it right below me to the left of the screen over my right shoulder at Austin_Oerman on Twitter. If you've got any comments, any questions, any concerns, anything you want to go back and forth about, let me know. I'll be on Twitter. I'll see it as soon as this is posted. I know we'll have Husker football coming up soon, but never too early and never the wrong time for some college basketball chatter. Tonight, we are continuing our conference preview series. We are on to our fourth conference. We started out with the Big Ten. We moved into the SEC, and then last week we went through the Big 12. Didn't post a Twitter poll for this one because really I did it to spite Rico. No, not entirely. He wanted me to do the Big East. I said, nope, we're going to talk about the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. That'll be what we're talking about here over the course of the next, probably about an hour or so. But again, this is podcast version. It's not live on radio. I'm not going to stretch it to an hour if we don't get to an hour. If we go longer than an hour, hey, God bless the podcast format rather than the live radio. Again, Twitter at Austin_Oerman. Follow, subscribe to the show by searching the Corner 3 wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you've missed the previous episodes, again, with the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12, we'll go through the players you have to know first, and then we'll kind of give a breakdown of the teams in the conference in different categories. Starting with the players, we'll go through the Player of the Year candidates, the guys that transferred in and out that I think are impactful, some freshmen that'll be impactful, some key returners, and then X factors that are going to shape the ACC conference race and, Player of the Year race. So let's just dive right into that in terms of the ACC Men's Basketball Player of the Year. We'll start with last year's winner, RJ Davis from North Carolina, far and away his best season in Chapel Hill. Boosted his scoring average from 16 points to 21 points, dished out another half assist per game, didn't rebound it as well, especially on the defensive end, but RJ Davis shot 87% from three, just under 40%, 39.8 from three-point range, and 43% overall, 45% shooting from two. RJ Davis shouldered a lot of load offensively for North Carolina last year, and he had to with Caleb Love leaving, right? There's the rumors about the two of them, potentially dating the same girl. There's something weird going on in that locker room. 2 years ago, Carolina became the first preseason number one team to miss the NCAA tournament. Caleb Love transfers out. RJ Davis says, yep, moment is mine. He took full advantage. His career high now is 42 points. He did that against Miami in February of last year. He scored 30 points 4 times, and there were only, a couple handfuls of games where he didn't score 20. Only held to single digits twice, once in the win on the road at Duke and then once against Cal Riverside. RJ Davis blossomed into one of the most well-rounded scorers in the ACC, and Carolina needed that from him. There wasn't a lot going on. I think the shift off the ball for RJ Davis, right, with Caleb Love running point, RJ Davis running point, your turn, my turn. Another guy we'll get to in a little bit in terms of the X factors, Elliot Cadeau took over as point guard, and that really freed RJ Davis up to hunt shots, to get to his spots. And I think it instilled the confidence in him that, hey, I'm the go-to guy. I'm the one that Carolina wants to run its offense through. And unfortunately for Duke fans, congrats to RJ Davis, he thrived in that. The other guy that returns that I think had a decent case in most other years hard when you're going against the season RJ Davis had, is a guy that'll hit close to home for Husker fans, Nebraska basketball followers. Hunter Sallis, I think, has to be in the conversation for ACC Men's Basketball Player of the Year. Again, far and away the best season of his career last year after 2 years at Gonzaga, where he played in 69 games across those 2 years, but never averaged more than 4.5 points per game. He gets to a Steve Forbes system that is so great for guards. And Hunter Sallis thrived from day one. He averaged 18 points, 2.5 assists, and 4 rebounds per game to go along with over a steal and half a block per game as well. Hunter Sallis shot 54% from 2, 40% from 3, and 78% at the free throw line. Another guy that proved he can score at all 3 levels and really took the reins for last year's Wake Forest team. It was awesome to see, just from the Nebraska prep standpoint, just how well Hunter Sallis was able to take control of that Wake Forest program. They went 21-14 overall, 11-9. Ended up missing out on the NCAA tournament, but they played their way back into bubble contention. Hunter Sallis was the biggest reason for that. He was their leading scorer by about 2.5 points per game. Among their leading rebounders, right at 6'5", he's an athletic guard. He proved it. Wasn't a lockdown defender necessarily, but wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there. And Hunter Sallis blossomed into the player that I think a lot of people in Millard and Omaha, Nebraska, even, I think the people in Spokane, Washington were proven right about what Hunter Sallis could be. He faced a big decision in declaring for the NBA draft or returning to school. Eric Strickland and I have talked about this during On the Block a couple times. We both think Hunter Sallis made the right choice in returning to Wake Forest to play another year. He would have gotten drafted. I don't think he was a first-round pick. Another big year from Hunter Sallis, if he averages, another couple points per game, if he rebounds at a, 6 or 7 rebounds per game clip and shows maybe just a little bit more playmaking ability, get up to 4 or 5 assists, Hunter Sallis is a first-round draft pick and might even be knocking on the door of the NBA draft lottery among the top 14 picks. I think that he has to continue to prove that he can shoot it from long range. His free throw numbers are okay, not great, 78% each of the last 2 years. His three-point percentage went from 26 to 25 and then all the way up to 40. So he's got to prove that last year is who he is. Even if he doesn't shoot 40 again, if he's 37, 38% plus, I think that's enough for NBA scouts to say, yep, we're sold on this guy as a 3-and-D prospect. He's going to be a shooting guard in the pros, maybe a secondary ball handler. But Hunter Sallis being back is absolutely massive for Wake Forest. The other player of the year candidate, Cooper Flagg. I don't know if there's another choice you could really make in terms of the third slot, because Cooper Flagg is coming in as maybe the most hyped college basketball product this side of Zion Williamson. Cooper Flagg is going to be that guy. 6'9", winning Duke's conditioning test earlier in the week. 2.5 level score, right? He can dunk, he can finish inside. He's got the pull-up jumper, just needs to iron out maybe some of the kinks in the long-range shooting consistency. But where people, especially NBA scouts, are excited about Cooper Flagg is on the defensive end. Great instincts on defense, able to not just block shots, but also guard on the perimeter and get steals. He's versatile. He's a weak side help menace coming over to tour teams. He's long, he's rangy, he's athletic, and he is the centerpiece of what Duke is trying to build. We'll get into Duke a little bit more later with some other guys, but I think it really is that three-way race. And if Cooper Flagg were to win ACC Men's Basketball Player of the Year, he would be the first player to win it as a freshman since Zion. Well, guess what? The year before, a different Duke player did it, Marvin Bagley. You have a couple of years without a Duke player, 2014-15. Guess what? Jahlil Okafor, as a freshman, won ACC Men's Basketball Player of the Year. We've seen this happen for Duke players time and again, right? Especially big men. Marvin Bagley came in, dominated from day one. Jahlil Okafor is the centerpiece of that 2014-15 title team. Zion Williamson might have been the best one-and-done college basketball player ever. He's at least in the conversation. Cooper Flagg, that's the level of prospect that Duke is getting, and we know that, John Shire was on staff for those teams. He knows how to feature these highly rated recruits. No, we haven't seen a guy like Cooper Flagg at Duke, but they know how to use him. I think Cooper Flagg, I don't know if he should be the front runner for the award, especially with a couple returners back in RJ Davis and Hunter Salas. But I really think Cooper Flagg is going to at least make a run for Men's Basketball Player of the Year, and he's the odds-on favorite for Freshman of the Year. Let's just jump right into freshman while we're already there. Obviously, Cooper Flagg, right, what he's going to be able to bring to the Blue Devils on the defensive end. He's going to be the offensive hub as well. I think he's the choice most people would bet on right now. But there's some other interesting players that I think are worth talking about. One of them plays at Miami. He's the number 1 overall player in Pennsylvania, number 3 ranked shooting guard, 7th prospect overall. Jalil Bethea out of Warminster, Pennsylvania, 6'4", 170, and his nickname should be Buckets. Buckets Bethea. He is so good. He's both silky smooth and explosively athletic at the same time. 3-level scorer, can knock it down from 3. Shot 41% in the Nike EYBL circuit, 86% at the free throw line, 60% on 2-point field goals as well. Adam Finkelstein, the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports, said, well, he's usually looking for his own shot. Bethea has shown flashes of being a good passer when he wants to be. Similarly, he moves well laterally and shows stretches of being an impactful defender. Miami hasn't ever really locked down on defense under Jim Larrañaga. I think this is a huge coup for them. We'll get into Miami when we get into the team section, but I think Jalil Bethea, if he averages 20-plus points per game and Miami makes a surprise run at an NCAA tournament berth, Jalil Bethea might be in the conversation for Freshman of the Year. He's a stud. He's going to be a load for teams. Athletically ready. I don't think the speed of the game is going to phase him, and I think that Miami got a really good player in Jalil Bethea. Another McDonald's All-American, right? Cooper Flagg was. Jalil Bethea was as well. Ian Jackson. He's a ceiling swing. Similar frame to Hunter Salas, 6'5", 185, number 2 player in the state of New York, number 4 shooting guard, and number 8 national prospect. Both of those are one spot, of course, behind Jalil Bethea, who we just talked about. Finkelstein wrote again here about Ian Jackson. Talented and competitive, but sometimes inconsistent. He plays an attacking two-way style, putting pressure on the rim offensively and getting after it defensively. Real spurt ability, where there are days and stretches where he can look like one of the absolute best in the country, and others where he leaves you wanting more. The reason I think I like him for Carolina is because there are days that Ian Jackson's going to be the best player. RJ Davis can move, off the ball. He can be that secondary guy that you can go to if you need a bucket. But if Ian Jackson's hot, you're going to stay out of the way and let him cook. Vice versa. If Ian Jackson is not contributing offensively, if he's a little crazy in the first 7-8 minutes of a game, you can yank him, put him on the bench and say, hey, calm down, slow down, focus, and give you a couple minutes to compose yourself. You're going to go back in there and play defense, but RJ Davis is taking shots. That's who we're going to play through tonight. Ian Jackson ought to be a lottery pick. Again, the athletic talent is there, and what he shows in stretches is absolutely astonishing. We'll see if Hubert Davis and this Carolina roster is the right one in order to get him to that measure of consistency. Let's move on from the Player of the Year candidates and the impactful freshmen to the transfer portal. We'll get into the returners and the X factors here in just a minute. The impactful transfers in, the number 1 for me, call me a homer if you want, Mason Gillis. He transfers fresh off of a national runner-up appearance with Purdue, where he played the first few years of his career. He started there, redshirted in 2019-20, and then played the last 4 years at Purdue. 132 career games in college, 63 of them starts. He didn't start a game last year. Big Ten 6th man of the year, played in all 39 games, 21 minutes per game with no starts. And the selling point for him, knockdown three-point shooting. 35% as a freshman, 41% as a sophomore, down to 36% as a junior. But then as a senior, on similar volume to his junior year, he jumped from 36% to 47%. And the free throw shooting's always been there. He's an 83% shooter for his career, 86% last year on low volume, because Mason Gillis is not a guy that has the ball in his hands a lot. Mason Gillis, the archetype for him is Klay Thompson. Now, Mason Gillis has not in his career done anything like Klay Thompson, right? Not the 60-point game with only 4 dribbles or anything like that. In fact, Mason Gillis's season high in points last year, 16. And that came in the road loss to Nebraska, where he went 5 of 10 from 3-point range. He scored double figures just a handful of other times, 14 points twice, 12 and 11 points, and then 10 points a couple times as well. But Mason Gillis, I think, is the perfect fit for this Duke roster because of his ability to stretch the floor, because of the fact that he's low volume. He won't take shots away from Cooper Flagg, from Tyrese Proctor, from Caleb Foster, whoever else. He's competitive defensively, not a lockdown defender. You want him on threes and maybe fours more than you do on twos. But again, upperclassman with 130 career games played, knows his role, and has championship pedigree to add to the three-point shooting. I think this was the best addition Duke men's basketball could have made in the offseason out of the transfer portal. Another guy that Nebraska had its eyes on, right? Nebraska was interested in Mason Gillis. He didn't end up coming. Nebraska's pursued this guy a couple times now. Hasn't landed him either time. Javian McCollum. He started his career out with Siena in the MAAC. He transferred to Oklahoma last year. And again, the shooting was a concern for him, only 31% overall, but a well-rounded player. 6'1", 170 out of Fort Myers. He averaged 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. He's a 90% career free throw shooter, which tells me his shooting numbers aren't necessarily that worrying. From three-point shot, 43% as a freshman at Siena, 36% as a sophomore, and then down to 31% last year. So right now, that is the outlier. But again, he's had 2 years of success from long range and 1 year without much success from long range. And the reason that I think he is a potentially impactful transfer is because he means a lot to this Georgia Tech team that he's transferring to. Georgia Tech lost a lot. Georgia Tech is a team I have a lot of questions about that we'll get to here in a little bit. Losing Miles Kelly to the transfer portal hurts. Bringing back Ndongo is big. Terry is big as well. But I think with McCollum's ability to handle the ball and score, he's going to be a big help for Coach Damon Stoudemire as he tries to get Georgia Tech back to the NCAA tournament. I really think that Miles Kelly is probably the more natural scorer, the more athletic player between the two, but I really like the experience that McCollum brings now at 2 previous stops. I don't think he's a hired hand, right? I think Oklahoma is a program trending in the wrong direction, as you heard me talk about in the SEC episode. I think he went to a program that definitely has potential. I don't think Tech is an ACC favorite by any means, but they can be interesting. And I think that Javian McCollum would be right smack dab in the middle of that. The third transfer to get to then, Damian Dunn. This is a coup, an absolute coup for Jeff Capel and the Pittsburgh Panthers. Damian Dunn, I should say, started his career out at Temple, where he was there for 4 years. He averaged 15 points per game, just about 14 and a half in his time at Temple. He transfers into Houston, where he's more of a role player, not necessarily the star. His minutes go from 31 a game to just 17 and a half per game at Houston. Again, loaded roster, deep roster. I think Damian Dunn is one of those players that was a little too interested in getting buckets to always earn the trust of Kelvin Sampson, who's a defensive first coach. Only averaged less than a steal per game and barely any blocks as well, which is fine for a guy that's 6'5" and 165. I think Damian Dunn really wants to fill it up. And I think Pitt needs that with the departure of Bub Carrington. Dunn can score from all 3 levels. He's not a consistent shooter, but he shot over 30% the last 3 years, including 35% as a junior at Temple. He can get to the rim. He's a decent finisher there and a pretty darn good free throw shooter as well. 80% for his career at Temple, 71% last year at Houston. I think Damian Dunn is the focal point for this Pitt team. He has, again, really good pedigree, really good experience through Temple. His 1 year at Houston, I think, was a learning experience from him. So bringing that veteran savvy and that ability to score the basketball, I don't think he's as good a scorer as Bub Carrington, but he's older. He's a grown man. He's going to be ready for the rigors of ACC play. And I think he's just one of the big pieces that Pitt brought in, and I think he's going to end up being the best player on that team. In terms of the transfers out, a couple of these remain in the conference, but in terms of the loss to their team, one of them is Boopy Miller, Kevin Miller from Wake Forest. He paired with Hunter Salas last year. Again, he was the second leading scorer on that team at just under 16 points per game. Whereas Hunter Salas could lock you down, Kevin Miller wasn't quite the same defender. Good player in his own right, and I think it's a really good get for SMU, of all places, right? So that is now an in-conference transfer from Wake Forest to to SMU. Yeah, Kevin Miller's only 6 foot, 165 pounds. He played at Central Michigan for a couple of years before going to Wake Forest last year. He's the bucket getter for an SMU team that I think really needs one. Not going to bring a whole lot else to the table. Pesky guy will read some passing lanes for steals, but definitely not a consistent defender. Boopy Miller can play with the ball in his hands. He can shoot it from long range. Career 36.5% shooter. I think that's a big loss for Wake Forest and a really, really good get for SMU. Another impactful transfer out. This one hits a little close to home. I get why he made the decision, and I talked about him in the Big 12 episode. I think he's going to be key for this team. Jeremy Roach, postseason hero, postseason legend, a guy that played a whole lot of games at Duke. Maybe a little inconsistent his first couple years, but then really stepped up in the postseason, especially in Coach Mike Krzyzewski's final year. You never want to lose a guy like Jeremy Roach. I think Tyrese Proctor can be really good. I think Caleb Foster was maybe overlooked because of his late season injury and just how good Jared McCain got. Duke's backcourt is there. Sion James as a defensive first transfer from Tulane could be really interesting for Duke, but I still think losing the savviness of Jeremy Roach, the fact that you're able to move him off the ball and use him kind of as your second point guard instead of the primary one, Jeremy Roach really found a home in Durham in the role that he was used in last year, and he was the bridge, right? He was a Mike Krzyzewski guy and a John Shire guy. So Duke loses that tie back to the Mike Krzyzewski era, and I wish Jeremy Roach nothing but the best, but I think his leadership, his stability, and really just his ability to step up in big moments is going to be missed, and Duke has to replace it. One guy that Duke adds that I think is one of the most under the radar pieces is Malik Brown. He transfers from Syracuse to Duke. I think it's a big loss for Syracuse. They just don't have much left on the defensive end. Syracuse is just kind of hanging around the middle of the conference, and we'll get there in just a minute. But Malik Brown is not a star in the traditional right. Average just under 10 points per game. But what Malik Brown is a worker. He is incredibly consistent. He can play the 4. He can play the 5 at 6'8", 213. He's a monster on the boards, averaged 7 rebounds per game last year, with 2.5 of those coming on the offensive glass. But he averages 2 steals and a block per game. Again, as a multi-positional, maybe even omni-positional defender. And, oh, by the way, he started shooting 3-pointers last year, about half an attempt per game, but he shot 37% on them. We'll have to see if that continues. It's not where you want him most. He's a dominant at-rim finisher. I mean, shot 74% on twos. With that athleticism, the ability to finish through contact. But I think his ability to guard all 5 positions, protect the rim as well, makes him and Cooper Flagg maybe the most defensively dominant duo in college basketball this year. We've seen it in the NBA. Guard defense is important, but there's a reason that the defensive players of the year have tended to come from the ranks of big men and post men. Duke has 2 of those guys. They can defend the rim straight up. They can play weak side. They can get out on the perimeter and guard. Oh, and by the way, Malik Brown put up a 5x5 game. If you don't know what that is, it's 5 or more of whatever different category. He did that against Louisville. That would have been back in February. He ends the game with 11 points, 6 blocks and 5 steals, 5 assists, and 9 rebounds. Oh, by the way, he also made all 4 of his shots and went 3-4 at the free throw line. That is an incredibly well-rounded player. 5x5s are so difficult to come by regardless of the level of basketball. Malik Brown is another one of these low volume, high efficiency, high IQ players I think perfectly fills out a roster around Cooper Flagg and what his skill set is. We're through the transfers. We're through the freshman, the player of the year category. Key returners. I already talked about Hunter Salas a little bit, but I think it was big for both of these next 2 teams to get these next couple players back. First of all, for Syracuse, right, was teammates with Malik Brown last year. Highly rated recruit, number 21 in the 22 class, a guy that last year would have been on the transfers out list. JJ Starling, 6'4", 200, NBA-ready frame, has averaged 12 points per game for his career across 1 year at Notre Dame and 1 year at Syracuse. It's the shooting for him. That's the swing skill. Only a 68% free throw shooter for his career. His 3-point number is only 31%. JJ Starling takes a lot of shots, has had to. He hasn't played on great teams. Last year's Syracuse team was better than the Notre Dame team 2 years ago, but neither team would be mistaken for a powerhouse by any means. J.J. Starling has taken a lot of shots. He's averaging 11 shots per game for his career. He's been the primary option as both a freshman and a sophomore. And I think that's going to happen again with Syracuse, especially with Judah Mintz being gone. I believe Judah Mintz is gone. Let me double check before I go even further into that. Yes, he was not selected in the draft. He signed a summer league deal. But yeah, Judah Mintz being gone, he took a lot of shots as well. J.J. Starling has maybe an even better NBA frame, maybe not quite as athletic, but 6'4", 200. That is a strong, rocked up guard that needs to get more consistent at the rim and iron out the jump shot. Also on the defensive end, right? Syracuse goes away from playing in the 2-3 zone under Red Autry. He averages a combined steal and block per game. J.J. Starling is so focused on getting buckets. He has the frame and I think the potential to develop into a better passer and especially a defender. He's just got to focus on it, right? He's averaging essentially the same number of assists and turnovers per game for his career. He has not been efficient. But as a junior, if he's able to take a leap into a true number one option and be consistent with it, I think Syracuse can, I don't want to say be a dark horse necessarily, but Syracuse does have some interesting pieces. Maybe J.J. Starling is a down ballot ACC Player of the Year vote getter. The other returner that I think is key is Marcus Burton for Notre Dame. Notre Dame under Micah Shrewsbury, not that great last year. Maybe a little pesky, but Marcus Burton is so much fun to watch. Undersized guy out of Penn High School in Indiana. He's 5'11", 170 pounds. He was the newcomer of the year, the rookie of the year for the ACC last year, all freshman team, and even made an all ACC team. Averaged 17.5 points per game, 4 assists per game, 3 rebounds per game. 82% of the free throw line tells me he's going to be better than a 30% three-point shooter down the road. But Marcus Burton really feels like the centerpiece for Notre Dame for the next couple years. I love that he decided to come back right again with his small frame. Getting him back is huge. You lose Kerry Booth and Matt Zona, but you get Marcus Burton back with Braden Shrewsbury. Yes, Micah Shrewsbury's son. Tate Davis is back. J.R. Konecki's back. Those are all guys that averaged at least 7.5 points per game last year. I'm not sure. I love what they did out of the transfer portal, but getting 2 top 100 freshmen to come in. Notre Dame's going to be young, but I think Notre Dame can be pesky. They're at the very least interesting to me. So J.J. Starling, Marcus Burton, and Hunter Sallis, I think, are key returners, and how those players, progress tells me a lot about how I view those teams this year. And now we get to the X factors. The biggest X factor for me, it's a Duke basketball player. It's Tyrese Proctor. I don't worry about what Mason Gillis and Malik Brown are going to bring to the table. Cooper Flagg's going to be a stud. Caleb Foster will have his moments, but I don't think he's going to run as much point. Tyrese Proctor is going to have the ball in his hands. He has had an up and down career at Duke, right? Tantalizing flashes of success. I don't say he's disappeared in big moments, but you always just think there's one more play for Tyrese Proctor to make. He's a decent shooter, not a great shooter. A decent free throw shooter, not a great free throw shooter. He'll take some tough ones, but at 6'5", 180, he's got an NBA frame. He's got NBA vision. That's what they were talking about with him. As he came over to Duke, he enrolled a year early out of Sydney, Australia. He attended the NBA Global Academy there. He's averaged 9 points, 3 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game for his career. I want to see Tyrese Proctor take another step up in efficiency from all 3 levels. I want to see Tyrese Proctor continue to impact the game as a passer. He makes NBA level reads already, but get more consistent rebounding and step up, take over Jeremy Roach's role as the closer. I know people say it's going to be Cooper Flagg, and I'm sure he gets his opportunities, but there's going to be a moment where a team takes away Cooper Flagg. He's being double teamed, and Tyrese Proctor is going to need to hit a big shot, and I want to see him do it. Does he have the Quinn Cook junior year jump in him? Does he have the Trey Jones jump in him? Does he have the Grayson Allen jump in him? Tyrese Proctor can be an NBA player, but right now I get why he's had to stay in school. I think there's more in him. Another X factor on Tobacco Road, Elliot Cadeau. Started for Carolina last year. One of the quickest guys you'll ever see at 6'1", 180. Averaged 4 assists per game, but only 7 points per game. The fact that he was able to make it work despite shooting 19% from 3 and 65% from the free throw line as a small guard tells you just how quick he is, how pesky he is defensively, and just how good a passer he is. Elliot Cadeau in the pick and roll is a maestro. He's able to sling cross-court passes with both hands. He plays with good pace and good tempo, but he's not an NBA player because he can't shoot it. There's a video of Elliot Cadeau going against a streamer who, with hands down, Elliot Cadeau was bricking everything. The streamer beat him one-on-one. Not a good look for a guy that I think is a solid basketball player, but he has to be more than just a great passer and a pesky defender. He needs to be able to step up and hit an open shot. Again, 19% from 3 and only 65% of the free throw line. The shot doesn't look incredibly busted. He's just not good at it. Maybe it's because of his youth. Maybe he just needs more reps at it. If Elliot Cadeau is a 33% three-point shooter and a 75% free throw shooter, Carolina takes on a whole nother level of danger. If he's the same player he is, man, that puts a lot on RJ Davis's plate for another year. The other X factor for me, as it comes down to the ACC race, Omaha Ballou. This is a guy that I know Husker fans were in on and wanted as well. Didn't do much for Iowa State last year. 6'8", 225-pound guy out of Waukee, Iowa. Spent a year at Link in Missouri. Number 11 overall recruit in 2023. Omaha Ballou didn't see the floor as much as I thought he was going to for Iowa State. Only played in 20 games, never started. 7 minutes per game is all he got. Just about a shot and a half in those 20 games. 57% from twos, not bad, but only 61% at the free throw line. Omaha Ballou, I don't think, is ever going to be a go-to scoring option. I don't think Wake Forest needs that. What Wake Forest needs is him to lock in on the defensive end, be that lockdown wing defender, take on some power forwards as well, and be a little bit of a play finisher at the rim. Omaha Ballou has the athletic gifts. He's still probably learning a little bit of the feel for the game to some degree. He's better than what he showed at Iowa State, and I'm curious to see if Wake Forest and Steve Forbes are able to get the most out of a wing. They've been good with guards. They've been solid with bigs, but you just don't have any Wake Forest wings that come to mind, and I think Ballou is best as a big wing. I think he's best as an inside-out perimeter guy, or inside-out perimeter defender. So I think there's a lot in there. If Omaha Ballou turns into a lockdown defender and knows his role offensively, Wake Forest is going to be at the top of the ACC. If he doesn't, or if he struggles with it, then I think Wake Forest is in the middle. That gets us through the players. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the teams when we get back to the corner three here. We'll go through these a little bit quicker than we did the players. Fewer stats, more just kind of general sorted thoughts on these teams and their categories. We'll be right back here on the corner three.
Here to talk to you about Window World Lincoln. At Window World, we specialize in replacement windows, doors, siding, and roofing. Whether you're looking to enhance the beauty of your home or increase its energy efficiency, we've got you covered. And here's the best part. We offer the best for less. Our team is dedicated to providing top quality products and exceptional service at affordable prices. We want to earn your business and make your home improvement dreams a reality. So why wait? Contact Window World Lincoln today at 464-7313 or visit our website at windowworldlincoln.com. Window World Lincoln, where quality meets affordability.
Get rid of pesky critters once and for all with Bats to Rats. Their expert team is here to help you reclaim your home. No more sleepless nights caused by crawling critters or flapping wings. Bats to Rats ensures a safe environment for every family member. Check the website at batstorats.com for amazing offers, and if you mention this ad, you'll receive $10 off your initial inspection cost. Call Bats to Rats today at 402-781-8691. That's 402-781-8691. Bats to Rats.
Back to the corner three on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Welcome back to the corner three, the ACC men's basketball preview. If you have any thoughts on anything I've talked about so far, let me know on Twitter at Austin_Oerman. We're getting into teams after we just went through the players. We don't have much to say on the favorites. It's Duke and Carolina. Those teams finished first and second last year. Carolina won the conference by a closer, by 2 games. Beat Duke in both games last year as well. Carolina had Duke's number. Duke finishes 2 back. It was really that 2-team race at the top of the standings. You do have Virginia 2 games back of Duke and Pitt a game back of Virginia in 4th. But with a couple games to go, it did still come down to Duke and Carolina. With the conference championship on the line, Duke really didn't show up in Cameron, so Carolina ends up winning it by 2 games. And I foresee the same this year. What do I think about who else could contend for the conference? I came up with 4 dark horses, and we'll put these in, let's do ascending order. So we'll start with the longer shots, the longer bets, and before we get to ones that I think really do have a legit shot. I think Wake Forest is a dark horse. I'm worried about their big men depth. I think Hunter Salas, like I've talked about already, is a fantastic player. I think getting Cameron Hildreth back and Efton Reed back is big. Parker Friedrichsen, a one-time Nebraska target. I'm curious to see if he takes a step up as a bench piece for them. A couple interesting additions in Trevon Spillers and Tyler Johnson from App State and Louisville. But the big men depth, right? Behind Efton Reed, what does Wake Forest have in the post? They'll play some good post players this year. If Wake Forest front line is able to survive, I think the Demon Deacons can be a first-round bye team, maybe even a double bye team in the ACC. But until I see it, I'm not necessarily going to believe it. Another team I think could be a dark horse is a newcomer, SMU. You lose Jurek Phelps, but you bring back some really interesting pieces, and I love what they were able to do out of the transfer portal. You get Chuck Harris back. He was your second leading scorer last year, then a couple depth pieces, but you get Boopy Miller from Wake Forest to transfer in. Matt Cross averaged 15 in the A-10 at UMass. I love the addition of Johan Traore. He comes from Cal Santa Barbara. That's a program that has been in and out of the NCAA tournament. He's a 6'11", 235-pound center out of France, averaged 14 and 5 last year. I think he needs to rebound at a higher rate if SMU is going to depend on him as their full-time center. But Johan Traore is going to be a problem for ACC teams. The other things that they did out of the portal include Tibet Gorner, stole him away from Tim Miles, actually, at San Jose State. Get AJ George from the beach. And Kario Okendo was the guy that was at Oregon, Nebraska, or Georgia. Nebraska was in on him. He ends up at SMU. This is a guy that has the athletic frame. He's like 6'4", 230, right? He's a downhill attacking guard. He can play defense as well. I think he's a bench player. I think he's a role player for SMU, but I think there's some definite ceiling with him. The other 2 dark horses that I have in the ACC, number 1 is Clemson. Last year, the Tigers finished in 5th place at 11-9. They beat Syracuse on the tiebreaker. Clemson was a pain in the butt. I don't think Brad Brownell's seat was too warm, but you just never quite know, especially with football. People are getting antsy. Clemson loses, 2 leading scorers in PJ Hall and Joseph Girard, but you get back Chase Hunter, who averaged 13 points per game. You get Ian Schiffeline back as well. And I think those 2 guys are ready to step up. Chase Hunter is the guard, Schiffeline as the big man. And then some interesting ads out of the transfer portal. The 2 names that I think should stand out, Jaden Zachary, who averaged 11 points at Boston College. He'll be able to run the point. And Victor Locken, who averaged just under 9 points at Cincinnati. That's a really interesting couple of high major ads. Jaden Zachary has played on some not very good Boston College teams, but getting Victor Locken, who's 6'11", 240, to patrol the interior, I think that's going to go a long way for Clemson as the PJ Hall replacement. Chase Hunter's got to take a step forward. We'll see if either of their 2 higher scoring transfers, Jake Heidbreder or Miles Foster from the mid-major ranks, are able to contribute. But getting guys with high major experience in Jaden Zachary and Victor Locken to plug into the starting lineup, getting a top 100 recruit in Dallas Thomas and another 4-star in Dell Jones. Yeah, losing PJ Hall's a big deal. He was a really underrated player for Clemson, but I think the Tigers are going to be just fine. Maybe the biggest boom or bust team in the ACC this year is Louisville. They lose Kenny Payne as head coach. They fire him after 2 absolutely abysmal and atrocious years. They go out and they get Pat Kelsey, who's been one of the best mid-major coaches for a few years running now, and I really think that he's going to be successful. He was with Winthrop for about 10 years. Then, of course, the College of Charleston most recently put together some really interesting pace and space 5-out teams. Louisville lost everyone, so they had to go bring in a lot. Sky Clark, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, Mike James, Trey White, JJ Traynor, Tyler Johnson all averaged at least 8.5 points per game last year. They're all gone, as is most of the bench. So this wasn't just a reload. This was a full rebuild for Pat Kelsey, and I really like what he put together. Terrence Edwards from a James Madison team that knocked off Wisconsin in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year, probably their best player. Kashawn Pryor, 13-point scorer at South Florida. Rain Smith, really fun Australian, follows his coach from Charleston. Abubakar Traore from the Beach, really interesting player. Javon Hadley from Colorado, fascinating. Corin Johnson from Washington, what's he able to do in a better situation? Kobe Rogers follows from Charleston. Noah Waterman from BYU. Oh, by the way, you get Chucky Hepburn to run point for you from Wisconsin. Ali Khalifa is a high ceiling type of player. And then you get a couple lower end transfers as well as a top 40 guy in Connie Ruths out of the ESPN 100. Louisville's fascinating, man. They have been so bad for the last couple of years under Kenny Payne. I like 75% of what, maybe even more, of what Pat Kelsey did in the transfer portal. It's a big ask to go from where Louisville was in the conference, the depths that program plunged to winning the ACC, and I don't think they win it. I'm more surprised if Louisville's not an NCAA tournament team than if they are. There are just too many good players and good pieces for the Cardinals to be that bad again. Teams that I think are going to be bad, we don't have to spend much time on. Florida State, I think, will continue its slide down the ACC. Last year, the Seminoles were 10-10, 17-16 overall, but that's a team that loses a lot. Darren Green, Primo Spears, Cam Corrin, Baba Miller, Jalen Worley, Cameron Fletcher, all averaged at least 6.5 points per game. They do get their leading scorer, Jameer Watkins, back, but I don't really know anything about what they did out of the transfer portal. Boston Holt from South Dakota, Jerry Deng from Hampton, Justin Thomas missed last year, last averaged 7 points a game as a roadrunner for Texas San Antonio. I think that Leonard Hamilton is a fantastic coach. I think he's betting on more of the same. Be long, be athletic, have a bucket getter or two, and that's the formula. I just don't see it working so well for Florida State. I'm just not sold on this roster. The other team that I think is going to end up playing on Wednesday, the first day of the ACC tournament, is Stanford. Losing Brandon Angel, huge. Spencer Jones gone. Problem. Kanan Carlisle, big get out of the transfer portal for Indiana. You lose Michael Jones. You also lose Peja Stojakovic's son, Andre, who averaged 8 for you. That's a really interesting young 3-and-D caliber piece. You lose Max Morrell, who I think is going to be a big player as well. Getting Maxime Reynaud, the Frenchman, back is big. Then you just get depth back, and you just kind of add whatever you can get your hands on out of the transfer portal. Jalen Blake's an in-conference transfer from Duke. Captain Chaos was his nickname. You add 4 freshmen, all of who were unrated. I think Kyle Smith is going to be a good coach for Stanford. I think that what he's been able to do at his previous stops, he'll fit in well in Palo Alto. I just don't see it this year. I think it's going to be a rough year for Stanford. Jared Hosty was never terrible at Stanford, but just always unexciting. I think Stanford's going to be pretty bad this year, but I think you give Kyle Smith a couple years and he'll get things, to where Stanford should be at least challenging for the NCAA tournament. Teams that are trending down, I think Boston College losing Quentin Post to the NBA draft, losing Jaden Zachary. That's a big blow for them. North Carolina State maybe trending down harder than any team in the country off their magical run to the Final Four last year. DJ Horn, leading scorer, gone. DJ Burns, Colt Hero, gone. Casey Morsell, gone. Mo Diarra, maybe the low-key most important piece on that team, gone. MJ Rice, gone as well. You get Jaden Taylor back, Ben Middlebrooks, who hit that big shot, back. Michael O'Connell back. You had Brandon Huntley Hatfield from Louisville. Dontrez Styles on another restart for his career from Georgetown is interesting. Mike James, also from Louisville. Kevin Keats saved his job last year. His seat was so incredibly warm. It wasn't necessarily the run to the Final Four that made it, but Carolina State kicking it in gear and winning the ACC tournament, beating both Duke and North Carolina in that tournament to win it and get the auto bid, and then the run they went on. You lose basically all of your most important players from last year's team. There's some interesting guys. Again, Taylor and Middlebrooks coming back as role guys are interesting. Marcus Hill, we'll see how his game scales up from the MAC to the ACC. Huntley Hatfield and James, are they going to be better players in a better situation? And then Dontrez Styles is a wild card. He can make or break that team. I just think NC State is trending down from the highs they reached last year. I don't think they're going to be terrible, though. Other teams that are trending down, Virginia Tech, I am very much not sold on this roster. 10-10 last year, 19-15 overall for Mike Young, but I'm just not a fan of the roster. You lose Sean Padula, you lose Hunter Couture, you lose Lynn Kidd. Those were your double-digit scorers. You get some depth pieces back, and then you add just a bunch of whatever in the transfer portal. Jaden Shute from Duke is going to be a role guy for them. Hysier Miller averaged 16 at Temple. He's probably the new go-to guy. Ben Burnham from Charleston averaged 12. You get a guy from VCU and a guy from Cal as well. I don't necessarily see the vision for Mike Young. That's why he's Mike Young and I'm not, I guess. But I think it's a good year if Virginia Tech goes 500 in conference play again. I just don't necessarily see that being the case. Teams with questions, Georgia Tech and Virginia. Georgia Tech last year, only 7-13, 14-18 overall. Mentioned them earlier with the addition of Javian McCollum. What is this program? What does it want to be? Damon Stoudemire there, of course. You lose Miles Kelly, Kyle Sturdivant, who are really important. You get Baye Ndongo and Lance Terry back, Nathan George back, which is big. You bring back a lot of your depth. You get Javian McCollum to be your go-to guy. You add Jaden Mustaf, who's the number 63 player in ESPN's top 100. Georgia Tech's interesting to me. I think that's a team that can get back to 500 or better if Javian McCollum is that guy, if some of their other transfer portal swings work out, but I'm not necessarily sold on it. We'll see. Georgia Tech could be a team in the middle. It could continue its slide down the ACC. I really don't know. And then we get to Virginia. Tony Bennett's name was thrown out a lot for the Michigan opening before Dusty May ends up landing that job. They lose Reese Beekman. They lose Ryan Dunn, who's one of the best defenders college basketball has ever seen. Jacob Grove's gone as well. Their leading scorer that returns is Isaac McNeely. He averaged 12 points per game. That's a role guy, not a star. Andrew Rohde, former St. Thomas Tommy, is very interesting to me. We'll see what he does his second year in Charlottesville. And then they just add a lot of whatever out of the transfer portal. Jalen Worley only averaged 8 points a game at Florida State. Elijah Saunders from San Diego State. Again, guy that's been around, has seen winning tradition as his games scale up. Day-Day Ames really fell out of favor with Kansas State last year. TJ Power is a guy I wanted Duke to keep, but I get why he would transfer out with Cooper Flagg coming in. Then you get Jacob Kofi, who's number 56 in ESPN's top 100. I just don't know what the ceiling is for this Virginia team. They overachieved as far as I was concerned last year. If it's 13-7 record, 23-11 overall. I didn't think Virginia was going to be that good, and maybe I need to give Tony Bennett the benefit of the doubt. I'm just not necessarily buying the roster. If Tony Bennett's able to get them to third in the ACC again, I deserve to never say another bad word about him ever again. And then we get to the mid teams in the middle. Syracuse losing Judah Mintz as the leading scorer, I think might actually be good for them. He took a lot of shots and a lot of tough ones. Losing Malik Brown hurts. And then what is J.J. Starling able to do as the go-to guy? Added Eddie Lampkin, which I think is an interesting add out of the transfer portal. He was at TCU and then Colorado. And you get the number 6 overall player in the 2024 class in Donovan Freeman. What is it that he brings to the table for Red Autry in his second year? I mean, 6'9", 205 power forward out of DC. He stays on the East Coast. Again, 6th overall from the IMG Academy. I think he's a swing player for them, right? Is he a go-to guy? Is he the one that you pair with J.J. Starling? Or is he just a guy? Does he need a year? Is he a year away? Syracuse last year finished 6th in the conference at 11-9. That's about where I would peg them this year, especially if Bubba Starling. Sorry, my Royals is showing. If J.J. Starling takes a leap, if Donovan Freeman is that guy, Maybe there's more in there for Syracuse, but I still think that just with the rest of the roster, that's a solid team. It's a good team, definitely not a great team. I think Pitt is in the middle as well. I like some of what they did. I don't get everything that they did out of the transfer portal. Losing Blake Hinson hurts. Bub Carrington had a fantastic freshman year as a one and done, and then you lose depth. Getting Ish Leggett back, interesting to me. You get both Diaz-Graham brothers back, and then you add Damian Dunn. That to me is the bet. Can you replace Bub Carrington with Damian Dunn? If that's the formula for Pitt, I think they end up about where they did last year, 12-8. I mean, yeah, anywhere from 10 to 12 wins in the ACC sounds about right for Pitt to me. Miami, it's the bet on offense. It's the bet on, is Jalil Bethea ready to go from the jump? You lose Norchad Omier, that's a big loss for them. You lose Wooga Poplar, who just blossomed into a really good player. Bensley Joseph was interesting. Kaishan George departed for the pros as well. You get Matthew Cleveland back. You get Nigel Pack back. You have those two guys. You add, like I mentioned, Jalil Bethea. You get a really fun player in Jalen Blackman, who led Stetson to the NCAA tournament. You land Lynn Kidd from Virginia Tech. Miami's just not a big team, and they haven't been for a while. That's the way that Jim Larrañaga wants to play. Lynn Kidd is not going to be a stretch big like Norchad Omier kind of developed into. He's going to be more traditional big man. Miami's going to have to change its style a little bit, right? It won't be the 5-out killer. It'll probably be more 4 around 1, where I think Miami's advantage is going to be in the backcourt. And that's a formula to be successful in March, right? Guards win. We've seen Miami make these long runs before. Not as sold on this roster, but there are enough interesting pieces back with Pack's experience, with what Jalen Blackman did for Stetson, with Matthew Cleveland on the wing. That's at least a solid starting point. Miami will be a pain in people's butt. I don't know if that's a top half of the conference team, but they're definitely going to win more than 6 conference games, and they'll be above 500 this year. 2 more teams to talk about, Notre Dame and Cal. We talked about Notre Dame a little bit. Marcus Burton and Braden Shrewsbury are the guys for them. I really think that they'll be a little bit better. I still don't think it's an NCAA tournament team in year 2 under Shrews, but I think Cal is a team, again, as a new addition. Cal's going to be better than Stanford, probably not as good as SMU. Losing Jalen Tyson and Fardaz Amak are 2 big losses. Jalen Cone gone as well. But you add a lot of really interesting pieces. You get BJ Omot from North Dakota. You get Rytis Petritis, which really fun name to say. Rytis Petritis from the Air Force Academy. I think he's the best player on that team this year. You had Christian Tucker from Texas San Antonio. You get Andre Stojakovic to come down from Palo Alto to join you. That's a really high upside swing, at least a really high level role player. Joshua Ola Joseph is going to raise the floor with what he was able to do in Minnesota. You get Matty Sissoko to be your big man. Something never clicked for him at Michigan State. I don't know if it was him. I don't know if it was Tom Izzo. I don't know what it was. But I think you add them to Jovan Blackshear Jr. from Grand Canyon. Cal's interesting. I think Cal's spicy. I don't think Cal's going to challenge to win the ACC. I think Cal's going to be in the middle. I give SMU more of a shot to win the conference. I give Stanford no shot. But Cal's not going to be a pushover. They're not going to be a cakewalk in Mark Madsen's first year over there in Cal. I'm excited to see what the Golden Bears are as one of those 2 teams that are, playing Pacific Coast basketball in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That'll put a bow on this edition here of the Corner 3. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the presentation of high school football on the air tonight, and thanks for going out of your way to find the podcast version here of the Corner 3. Again, don't forget, subscribe to the show, like the show, follow the show wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Make sure you check back next week as well for the social media clip. This is Aaron on Friday. You know what tomorrow is? Game day, Husker Nation. We won't talk about it on the Corner 3 next week. Maybe it's a mention, but we will wrap up our conference preview series by looking at the Big East. Thanks for listening. It's been fun. We'll talk to you next time here on the Corner 3. Go Big Red.